After caring for the paralyzed CEO for 2 long years, he eventually recovered. His very first action upon regaining his strength was to propose to the woman he had adored for years, the one who had left him behind during his struggles. The media painted them as an inseparable pair, announcing that they had finally reunited. I stood there, gazing at the large screens in the city square, broadcasting the proposal live, wordless. Silently, I tossed the ring in my pocket into the garbage. The weight of my obligation to him had finally been lifted. The pedestrians around me stopped in their tracks, their eyes fixed on the massive outdoor screen showing the live broadcast. And it wasn't just here. Across the entirety of London, all major displays were tuned into the same spectacle. The broadcast was crystal clear, down to the delicate tears welling up in the lead woman's eyes. The proposal's decor was unmistakably the work of Jonathan. In the final months before he regained his mobility, he had been meticulously planning and sketching out the entire event. Even the fireworks, each with its own flourish, were crafted to reflect his vision. I remember him back then, cold fingers brushing against my neck as he asked me what flowers I liked. I had told him violets, but as I watched the proposal unfold, what I saw was a sea of vibrant red roses, and the woman standing there, bathed in the romantic glow, wasn't me. It was Jonathan's old flame, his former girlfriend, the acclaimed designer Caroline. I quietly discarded the dull ring from my pocket into the nearest bin. The ring was unremarkable, far too large, and I was thankful I no longer had to carry it with me. Tossing the ring brought an overwhelming sense of calm, the kind I had never felt before. Not a single tear came to my eyes. It was over. My debt to Jonathan and the Ellis family had been repaid in full. I had been expelled from Ellis Enterprises. Not long ago, I had my own office space, but now, forget about the office. I couldn't even claim a small desk. The HR department handed me a cardboard box with my belongings. "Isla, here's everything you had in your office," the woman said, lowering her voice. "Jonathan personally requested that you leave. The severance package is already arranged. It would be best for you to go now." Her voice was gentle, though. I imagined Jonathan's actual words had been much more direct. "Get out." I leaned back in my chair, shrugged indifferently, and carried on with packing. I struggled to carry the box, and as I passed by my old office, I finally saw who had taken over. It had been converted into Caroline's private lounge, strewn with her sketches and drafts. Photos of her and Jonathan, intimate and candid, were pinned on the walls, where my once meticulously organized schedule used to be. I lowered my gaze, my knuckles turning white as I gripped the box's edges. But within moments, I let go. At the entrance of the company, a mass of people jostled me, causing the box to slip from my grasp, scattering my things across the ground. A stiletto heel stabbed the back of my hand in the commotion, sending a sharp pain shooting through my body. The street was crowded, and reporters and onlookers were all pushing towards one direction. Gritting my teeth through the pain, I looked up and saw Caroline emerge, arm in arm with a man. Her crimson dress was striking, but even more captivating was the man beside her, Jonathan. He always hated crowds, and it showed in his expression, but still, he kept Caroline close, shielding her from the throng. Microphones were shoved in her face, journalists throwing out question after question. "Caroline, your engagement last week has been the top trending story online. Do you have any comments as the future bride?" Caroline smiled graciously. "I am beyond thankful to have been there for him during his most difficult 2 years. Jonathan had been soaring high, on top of the world, until the accident brought him crashing down, leaving him paralyzed for 2 years, scorned by society. If anyone had the right to say they had stood by him, it wasn't Caroline. She had disappeared, leaving me to be the one by his side. But despite the blatant lie, Jonathan said nothing. In fact, he seemed almost pleased by the words, showing no hint of disagreement. His gaze softened as he looked down at Caroline, tender and warm. The flashes from the cameras captured the perfect picture. The loving couple, completely lost in each other's eyes. Then, without warning, Jonathan's gaze shifted, landing directly on me, his expression cold as ice. Our eyes locked for a brief moment, and I managed a faint smile. A strange, newfound sense of peace spread through me. Jonathan's brow furrowed. In truth, I was also grateful that I had stayed by Jonathan's side during his lowest points. I had repaid every debt owed to him and his family. As I waited for a taxi that seemed to be taking forever, hunger pangs from low blood sugar gnawed at me, and my stomach ached. I sat on the curb, pressing my hand against my swollen, bleeding palm. The pain was intense. Caroline had always been special to Jonathan. I had known him long enough to understand. From a young age, he had been the crown prince of the Ellis family. He had countless rumors of romantic flings, but Caroline was the only one he publicly acknowledged. Their rekindled relationship was inevitable. Suddenly, the honk of a car startled me. A sleek black vehicle pulled up beside me. The window lowered slowly, revealing Jonathan's indifferent face, his fingers tapping impatiently on the steering wheel. Another wave of pain hit my stomach, and my eyelashes fluttered. He sneered, his eyes brimming with mockery. "You had this coming," he said coldly. I dropped my gaze. It was like traveling back 2 years, reliving Jonathan's callousness towards me. At the time, he had been heartless, telling me, "Your existence is a privilege." Now, I finally saw that his kindness in the years following was nothing more than a means to keep me around, afraid I'd leave and there would be no one left to care for him. I ignored him this time, remaining silent. The click of heels behind me echoed as Caroline stepped around me and into the passenger seat. "John, I'm late. These reporters are unbearable. I shouldn't have left you to handle them. Can you help me with them next time?" Caroline said in a teasing voice, but when her eyes fell on me, her tone faltered. She paled visibly. "Let's go, John. We're going to be late." Jonathan frowned slightly but revved the engine. I watched him, feeling that this would be my last time speaking to him. "I saw the live stream of your engagement," I began. "It was even more beautiful than the sketches you showed me. Everything was perfect, even if it wasn't filled with violets." I paused for a moment before adding, "I wish you both a long and happy life together." Jonathan's smile disappeared. His hand tightened on the steering wheel, veins bulging, as if my words had struck him deeply. He wore a wedding ring on that hand, and as I lowered my eyes, I missed the expression on his face. Caroline shifted uneasily beside him. "John, don't waste your time on irrelevant people. Let's go." Her voice was soft, but Jonathan's reply was sharp. "Isla, don't regret this." His words lingered in the air, but I remained silent. He sneered, stepped on the gas, and the car sped off, leaving me staring at the taillights as they disappeared down the road. His departure was loud and boastful. Much like the races he used to take part in, Jonathan had always been that way, easily angered by even the smallest comments from me. But regret? No, I had none. The taxi still hadn't arrived, and I began to wonder if it ever would when my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message appeared on the screen, brief and direct. "Where are you?" I hesitated for only a second before sending my location. About 30 minutes later, I found myself sitting stiffly in a business car, my arm extended as a young man carefully tended to my wounds. "Does it hurt?" Alex, the man beside me, asked quietly, his eyes focused on my injured hand. I shook my head. His breath was cool against my skin as he gently blew on the wound. I flinched. "It doesn't hurt," I repeated, firmer this time. He released my hand, finally satisfied, and responded with a soft murmur. "I didn't hear you say that." I couldn't help but feel conflicted. Alex had always been Jonathan's rival. The two of them clashed more times than I could count. During Jonathan's paralysis, Alex had even tried to take over many of his assets. And though I no longer had ties to Jonathan, the years spent under his influence weren't easy to shed. Alex leaned back casually. "I need a date for a banquet tonight," he said. My eyes dropped to my bandaged hand. "Will Jonathan be there?" I asked. Alex nodded, offering no further explanation. After a long pause, I spoke again. "If you're hoping to use me to hurt him, you might be disappointed. He doesn't care about me anymore." My voice was calm and quiet, stating the fact plainly. Alex fiddled with a lighter, his fingers playing with the small flame. "We'll see about that," he replied casually. I turned my gaze out the window, a small smile on my lips. I couldn't help but think of Jonathan at 17, his laughter echoing as he boasted to his friends. "I could never love someone like Caroline," he had said back then. Now, as I stood in front of the mirror in Alex's home, trying on dress after dress for the banquet, I found myself thinking of those days. Alex scrutinized each dress, discontent with every single one, until I tried on a silver white gown that shimmered like a night sky filled with stars. Finally, he paused, his eyes lingering on me. "This one," he said, his voice low. I looked at my reflection, and for a moment I barely recognized myself. The woman in the mirror was striking. Beautiful, even. It was like seeing a version of myself that had always existed in the shadows, suddenly stepping into the light. Alex appeared behind me, holding a necklace in his hand. He draped it around my neck, his fingers brushing my skin. "Not to provoke them," he said, "but to show Jonathan he's lost more than just his legs. He's lost his mind." I had never attended an event like this as Jonathan's companion, despite being by his side for years. When we arrived, the lights of the grand hall illuminated Alex's profile, sharp and refined, drawing murmurs of admiration from the crowd. "Who's the woman Alex brought?" I heard someone whisper. "He's always alone at these things." Another voice chimed in, recognizing me. "Isn't that Jonathan's insignificant assistant?" They barely had time to finish the sentence before a loud crash drew everyone's attention. A wine glass had shattered on the floor, spilling red wine across the hem of Caroline's gown. Jonathan stood nearby, his eyes fixed on me, shock written across his face. For the first time, I saw him look at me with a mix of confusion and surprise, as though he was seeing me for the very first time. Caroline followed his gaze, her own expression turning to disbelief. I inclined my head politely and turned to Alex, engaging him in conversation. But Jonathan wasn't done. He stormed over, his eyes cold and intense, reaching out to grab my arm. Alex intervened immediately, pulling me behind him. Jonathan's voice was low but commanding. "Isla, come here." I had never stood against him before, never hidden behind someone else. Whenever he called my name, no matter how far I was, I would come running. But not this time. I stood still, calm, and soft-spoken as I replied. "I've done more than enough." The warm breeze of midsummer drifted in through the windows. "We're done, Jonathan," I added quietly. His face paled instantly. Midsummer was a season of fleeting encounters. My connection to the Ellis family began with their sponsorship of children like me after the earthquake in our small town. My first visit to their home was when I was just 15, after ranking first in my class. Our teachers brought me along to express our gratitude to Mrs. Ellis. She was as graceful and kind as I had imagined, handling phone calls and making future plans with the adults in the room. I stood awkwardly at the side, stealing glances at a photograph on her desk. It was of a boy my age, handsome and defiant, glaring at the camera. He looked every bit the spoiled heir to a vast fortune. Moments later, the butler entered, looking stressed. "Madam, the young master is out racing his motorbike again." Mrs. Ellis barely looked up, too busy with her work. "Go fetch him," she said dismissively, but it was clear the butler didn't relish the task. One of the adults nearby nudged me forward with a laugh. "Why don't you send Isla? She's great with kids her age." Mrs. Ellis considered me for a moment before nodding. "All right, Isla, go with the butler and bring Jonathan home." Even though I was terrified, I nodded bravely. I had no choice. The butler and I drove to the outskirts of town, where Jonathan was speeding around on his red and black motorbike. He skidded to a stop in front of me, pulling off his helmet and revealing dark, tired eyes. "Who are you?" he asked bluntly. My heart pounded, but I managed to introduce myself. "I'm Isla," I stammered. He barely reacted, already bored. "My mother sent you to get me, huh? You can go back without me." But I was persistent. I waited, standing on the side of the road as he made circles around me on his bike. He passed by once, twice, 3 times, before finally stopping in exasperation. "Fine, let's go." I followed him back, walking behind him as the warm, summer breeze swept through the trees. That day, I learned his name, Jonathan. From then on, Mrs. Ellis decided I would stay with them, keeping an eye on Jonathan to prevent him from getting into trouble. Jonathan resented me at first. He saw me as nothing more than a spy sent by his mother. He would go out of his way to make my life difficult, but I was stubborn. No matter how much he teased me, I stuck by him. Eventually, he got tired of trying to push me away. "I'm sick of it," he told me once. "You're always around and I'm over it." Everyone knew Jonathan had a wild reputation, but there was always one plain, quiet girl who trailed behind him, trying to keep him from going too far. That girl was me. I had spent years trying to meet Mrs. Ellis's expectations, all the while following Jonathan, always just a step behind. By the time I was 18, the years of watching Jonathan had taken a toll on me. After finishing my final exams, I stood under the blooming wisteria tree in their courtyard, feeling uncertain about my future. Jonathan leaned against the railing nearby, his voice casual as he spoke. "Do you like me?" The question stunned me, and for a long time I couldn't move or speak. When I finally managed to answer, my voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, I do." Jonathan smiled at that and walked away. Later that night, I went looking for him. I found him lounging in a private room, laughing with his friends. As I approached, I heard him say something that shattered my heart. "Who would ever like someone like Isla? Me? I love Caroline." That was the first time I had ever heard Caroline's name. It was in that moment that I realized no matter how hard I tried, there were some things I would never be able to change. Even as I tried to build a life beyond Jonathan, the shadow of that moment lingered over me for years. The tangled, complex relationship between us and Caroline would continue, even coming to a head at that very banquet. As soon as we stepped into the hall, the tension between Jonathan and Alex was palpable. The two men never got along, and the room was filled with people eager to see what would happen next. I tugged on Alex's sleeve. "Let's leave," I whispered. Jonathan's gaze never wavered from me. For the first time, he saw me standing with someone else, and he wasn't happy about it. As we turned to go, I cast one last look over my shoulder. Jonathan stood motionless, his head bowed, his expression a strange mixture of vulnerability and distance. It reminded me of the moment he woke from his coma 2 years ago when his mother had already passed away from the crash. Caroline had tried to comfort him then, but he had recoiled at her touch. I chuckled quietly to myself. Alex raised an eyebrow. "What's so funny?" he asked. I smiled faintly and replied, "Not everyone has the strength to stand by Jonathan. Most people wouldn't bother getting close to him if they saw his real self." Jonathan was proud, too proud to accept his own vulnerability. After the accident, he couldn't accept his disability. His spirit was crushed, and to make things worse, he had lost his mother in the same crash. It wasn't long before he fell into depression, making multiple attempts to end his life. I remember one day vividly. I smashed a glass, grabbed a shard, and slashed it across my wrist in front of him. "If you want to die, fine. I'll die with you," I had told him. Jonathan had never seen me so intense, so emotional. His dark eyes had watched me for a long time before he finally spoke, gritting his teeth. "Fine, I'll live. But you have to promise me something, Isla. I'll get better." From that moment, he began working with his doctors, and after 2 long years, stood on his own again. He discarded his wheelchair shortly after. After the banquet, I returned to the Booth family home with Alex. His grandmother had been kind enough to take me in while I searched for a new job. Despite our history, Alex and I weren't particularly close. Most of our interactions had involved me apologizing to his family on Jonathan's behalf after one of their many fights. His grandmother was always warm, though, waving off my apologies with a laugh. "Young people fight sometimes. No big deal. Come sit with me for a while," she would say, offering me a seat by the window. But now, as I rode home in Alex's car, the silence was heavy. We weren't.